Hey people, welcome to the Run Test, it's Kieran here, and welcome to our video, the all-out mile test of the latest super speedy race shoes. So in this video, I'm going to be taking 5 of the most popular carbon plate race shoes, one nylon plated race shoe, one speedster here, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. I'm going to be putting them to an all-out mile test, doing 1 mile in each of them, flat out, going as fast as my legs will allow, to see which of these is the fastest for me, but also, importantly, to see when you're hitting those top paces in that best form, which of these comes up with the best ride. So with some of these shoes costing well over £200, if you're thinking of investing in a carbon plate racer, or maybe not, this is the video for you to watch. So how's this test going to work then? Well, I'm going to take these 6 shoes. I'm going to first do an easy kind of mile warm up, and then I'm going to do an all out, flat out, fast as my legs will carry me, mile lap of a course that's right near me on this park. It's a little bit twisty and turny, but not too crazy. There are some nice bends to put these shoes to a proper test. There's some nice straights where you can kind of let fly as well. So then the shoes that we have selected, we have the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus, Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2, Adios Pro 3, Alphafly Next Percent 2, obviously. We've got the beautiful Adidas Prime X Strung, and just as a little kind of control, just to see, we've also got to throw in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. It's the only nylon plated, non-carbon plated shoe in the test, but just wanted to see how that one would hold up as well against this other competition. So for some context, my fastest ever mile in race conditions, proper race conditions, so official time, is actually a 5:26. In other tests, I've also run a 5:27 on this park loop in the Adidas Prime X Strung. And I also did a 5:32, and I also did a 5:32 not too long ago in the Nike Alphafly Next Percent 2 on the same park loop that we're going to be doing these tests. So can I beat those times with the help of any of these shoes? Do some of them perform better than others when it comes to the speed? Will some of them later in the week actually be more forgiving when perhaps my legs are a little more tired? We're going to find out. So the first shoe we've got on test then is the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus. I'm just doing my warm up now. Obviously notable things, it's got a fairly low stack height compared to some of the shoes. It's got a lower drop compared to a lot of the shoes on this test. And obviously it's made for those people who are trying to extend their sort of stride a bit more to pick up the speed. So I'm just out prodding around for my warm up, and we'll go and do the mile in just a sec. So that's the first Herty mile test done. That one came in at 5:47 in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. The shoes ran okay. I've got pretty heavy tired legs. I found some interesting things about them. You know, running these before, run fast. And one thing, they have got quite a kind of stable base. In the corners, on the turns, they performed really well. No real issues with stability I didn't find in this particular mile loop. The one thing I will say is, compared to some of the other shoes I've run in recently, the Strung, the Alphafly Next Percent 2, they lack a little bit of the punch. You know, when I've got tired legs, I was looking for something a little bit more kind of give or feedback or a little bit of extra kind of from them, and that wasn't really there today. You have to work quite hard to find the sweet spot, I found, to really activate that flight foam, kind of blast foam. And yeah, on the second lap, I actually got into that and it really worked. But for the first lap, we're sort of struggling to really find the perfect sort of spot. I feel like you get more if you sort of come back a little bit off your toes into sort of more into the midfoot to really activate all of that foam. But overall, light, you know, they are comfortable on the foot. They held the foot really nicely. I thought the ride was kind of lively. They are a good carbon plated shoe. It remains to be seen whether or not I'm going to have these as my kind of favourite, but initial response is that they lack a little bit of punch of some of the others, but we will see how the others get on in the test we've got coming up for the rest. Second shoe out in the draw is the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2. Just doing my warm up now. Got these shoes on. First thing I'll say is I sort of have to work a little bit harder to get these to have a good lockdown fit and get the lacing right on them. They feel a little bit flatter as I sort of jogged over here, I think, than some of the other shoes are on this test. The heels sort of drop down a bit lower. I guess there's a sort of lower drop and a lower stack overall. Feel a little bit more connected to the ground underneath just here doing this warm-up, but let's go see how fast they are. So that's the lap done, mile 5:26 for that one. So that's 20 seconds quicker than the Metaspeed Sky Plus. Oh, blowing a bit now. But yeah, I mean, the Vaporfly Next Percent 2, I haven't run in these for a while. I've forgotten how much I really enjoy running fast in them. I love the fact they tip you forward slightly. You don't really, I mean, it just gets you up, and you've got to get into a form, I think, that's kind of up on your toes and shifting. And when you do that, these are quick. I think they encourage like a really high turnover, but with kind of power going down through that kind of mid to forefoot to get that kind of punch. I think it's far easier to get into that form and get these running than it was with the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus. They're good in the corners, you know, had decent enough kind of stability for me to be kicking around some of these corners, and overall they feel light. They're definitely sort of agile, they're racy, you know. As ever, big fan of the Vaporfly Next Percent 2, and that mile on quite tired legs, I think more tired than yesterday, has just proved to me how much of a good sort of all-out race shoe these are. So Vaporfly Next Percent 2, 5:26, current leading shoe. So test shoe number 3 then, I've got the Adios Pro 3 on my feet. Now the first things that you notice about the Adios Pro 3, when I first put them on, they're just a little bit hard to get comfortable on the foot, I find. The uppers don't quite hold, you've got to fiddle with the lacing quite a lot, and they're just not the most comfortable out of these kind of sort of plated race shoes that are going. You've got that big high stack of Lightstrike Pro foam underneath, the cutaways and the way that it's shaped. I think when you're first walking in them, it makes them feel kind of like the least sort of stable. They're very wobbly, sort of get that roll out to the edge. And yeah, there's a lot of bounce, a lot of sort of kind of spring, a lot of that kind of soft cushioning. You can feel it very early on, even in the warm-up, but it's going to be interesting to see how these ones compare to the Prime X Strung. It's obviously got a slightly higher stack of foam. See how those energy rods are working compared to like the full plated carbon shoes that we've got. So yeah, let's get the warm-up done. Let's go and see what these bad boys can do over a mile. So that's the mile done, and the Adios Pro 3. I got a 5:40 out of these ones. A couple of caveats: it's quite windy here today, so sections of this loop I was running into more of a headwind than I have the other days. Also, just felt a little bit low on energy generally. The ride of the shoe, my instant response, actually having run them fresh today, it was that actually, although they're kind of wobbly and a little bit unstable when you're sort of walking in them, that you can feel the cushion and compression and the spring of the midsole foam. When you get running up on that kind of mid to forefoot, as you get a lot of punch, but it's quite firmness in the landing. You can feel the ground, you know, there's sort of quite a good contact with the ground. And I think actually if you're up on that kind of fore to midfoot, the stability of them sort of improves a little bit, I think, when you're running at a faster pace than when you're running at a slow pace. That's how I felt them today anyway. I think they all felt more poppy than the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I felt like they were sort of maybe close to the Vaporflies, but overall kind of race feel on the foot, I think I've preferred the Vaporfly Next Percent 2s to this one so far. So Yeah, I mean, they are a punchy shoe. I know you can run fast them. They do, you can feel the propulsion. But yeah, so that is my Adios Pro 3 run today. The mile is done. So out for test number 4 then. I'm out in the Nike Alphafly Next% 2. Main features about this shoe, obviously you've got a huge stack of Zoom X foam. It's race legal, so it's not over the 40mm limit. You've also got full foot length carbon plate in these shoes. You've also got those pods that sit just to the rear of the forefoot, and those are designed there to give you a little bit of extra stability, a little bit of extra spring, working in tandem, you know, and helping you through that toe off. So first impressions whilst I'm doing the warm up compared to the other shoes, an extra percent and the ASICS Metaspeed Sky is kind of how wobbly and how soft and how squishy that foam feels when you're going at slower paces, even walking. A bit more wobbly, a bit more soft, and you can really sort of sense that you're on a high stack. And I can tell right now that the only way to really get that going is to engage it in a better kind of all-out kind of running form. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Let's go and do the mile and see how we get on. So that's the mile in the Alphafly Next% 2 done, came in at 5:13, so that is the fastest mile I've done yet. I think that's probably my fastest ever mile. It's obviously not on an official course, but loads of things to know about these shoes. One, you really feel that kind of high stack of Zoom X foam. It's softer and way more springy and bouncy and responsive, I think, than any of the other foams that I've kind of tested. You know, obviously the Vaporfly has it too, but it's got so much more of it here that there's a huge difference. The Alphafly Next% 2 in that kind of forefoot, when you're landing on that forefoot, I actually think, you know, it's a little bit softer than you're going to get with the Vaporfly Next% 2. When you engage it though, boy is it punchy. This is a shoe that has you kind of bounding around. It's probably not quite as stable as and sort of connected to the ground in the corners. That's the one thing on some of the turns here, that they're not too tight, but they're tight enough. I didn't feel quite so stable sort of flying around those, so I had to be careful with my foot placement. But overall, these are by far the sort of fastest feeling, the most kind of energy returning, sort of springy, bouncy, responsive, fast kind of shoes. And in that kind of all out form, when you're kind of connecting and landing kind of mid to forefoot for me anyway, and really engaging that whole platform, it really, really works. I think there's good width in that kind of mid sort of to forefoot section as well. That gives you a good platform to run off. They're not the most stable, but they are fast. And I really felt it, and again, even today on sort of slightly tired legs. So they are the fastest, and I think actually, in terms of how I feel about running in them, I think they've been the best so far as well. So we're on to shoe number 5, and I'm just doing my warm-up. This time we are out in the Adidas Adizero Prime X Strung. It's obviously the 50mm whopping great stack height of Light Strike Pro foam underneath, combining with those energy rods that follow the metatarsals. A few cutaways underneath to keep the shoe nice and lightweight. And you've got these kind of super lightweight strung uppers. It's the first time we've seen the strung technology used in one of the kind of Adizero shoes, and it makes for a nice kind of lightweight but excellent kind of upper fit. Now, with that extra stack, you'd expect these to really, really do a very solid job indeed. And we're going to find out. I would initially kind of from the warm up there, very high, and I would put these up kind of in the same sort of feel as the Alphafly Next% 2 really, in terms of what I'd expect from them initially from that warm-up. I feel like they're another shoe that when you sort of start moving at those kind of all-out mile paces, getting into that kind of mid to forefoot strike, that they're really going to come into their own. But we shall find out. The other admission here I should sort of give you is that I ran a marathon on the weekend, so it's now Thursday. I ran it on Sunday. I did a 3:01 in the Prime X Strung, loved that. But in theory, on tired legs, I shouldn't really be able to get anywhere near the times that I've done in the other shoes. So this is going to be a proper test for these shoes to see what I can get. Let's go and find out. So that's a mile done. Blowing pretty hard now. I did 5:23, which is slower than the fastest, which was in the Alphafly, I think on 5:13. But on tired kind of marathon legs, that's a good time, I think, for these shoes. You know, the things that I'd noted out there, they are punchy, they are poppy, they've got everything the Alphafly has, I think, in terms of that kind of forward propulsion and the energy and the tick over. They are not the most stable in the corner. So on this path, there are a few sort of, you know, it's like a 90-degree corner back over here you've got to come around, and sometimes I'm maybe weaving in and out a few people, but yeah, they didn't, your foot kind of sometimes rolls off to the side. The next few steps you've got to work to get them kind of back and engage them. Once you engage them right and you're sort of in a straight plane of motion, sort of forward motion, these shoes are punchy as you like. I absolutely love them for that. You know, you can feel the bounding forward with every kind of step, and if you're really driving down and making good ground contact and pushing off nicely, you're going to get more out of these. For me, it's like less of a roll through than maybe you might have something like with the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus. It's more just up on the mid to forefoot, punching, punch. But so I think fast, the uppers are great. They're really comfortable shoes. I just think maybe on tight bends in this course for the mile, that stability goes missing a little bit. Maybe that kind of slowed me down in a few of the bends, as well as the fact that I'm on tired legs. So a relative performance for the Adidas Adizero Prime X Strung was really positive. We are on to the final test. The 6th shoe in our all-out mile test is the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. This one's been thrown in as a kind of non-carbon option. I was kind of thinking maybe I should have gone in a big kind of heavy cushion shoe just to have a proper control to see what happened. But anyway, I thought it'd be interesting to see what you get out of a mile out of the Speed 3, because it's a popular shoe that people do use to go fast. Now, obviously, you know, straight up out of the box here where you're running on the warm-up, the stability is the best of the bunch for sure. The platform sort of nice and wide, nice and cushioned, nice and springy. There's still propulsion, there's still good energy coming back, but it's a very different ride compared to those other shoes that we've been testing so far. Particularly, you know, I mean, well, all of them have a sort of a slightly different feel. So I guess, you know, this is not a traditional shoe in the old school sense of the word, but now to a certain extent, this shoe is in a different category to those really squishy, punchy kind of super foam carbon plate shoes with the high stacks and the, you know, the big rebound. But it's somewhere kind of, yeah, it's not quite in that bracket, but somewhere just outside. So it now runs, I guess, a little bit more normal, I would say, you know, compared to those shoes. In terms of the overall foot feel, you know, you can plod along it like this doing the warm up and there's no problem at all. But anyway, that's not what we're here for. We are here to go and see if the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 can give me as much as some of the other shoes on this test. So let's go and find out. So I've just finished that mile test in the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3, and my mile was 5:37. Now, that's not the slowest mile actually. That actually beats the Adios Pro 3, also beats the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus for pure time. But I have to say, I'm going to be interested to go back and look at the heart rate data, and if you're talking about kind of rate of perceived exertion, how hard I was working out there, these shoes feel much harder to run in. They're so, when you're pumping like that and you're running really sort of on your top form, really pushing to the ground to try and get that kind of that response and that punch forward, they're very firm. I mean, at that pace they almost feel a little bit too firm. Or by comparison, you know, the softness of that high stack on the Prime X Strung or the Alphafly, or even the softness overall really of the Zoom X foam on the Vaporfly 2 is just very different to the way these Speed 3s kind of ride. The one thing they do have in their favour is sort of overall stability, which makes the cornering a little bit easier. But I did feel like I was having to do a lot more of the work. I felt like my legs were a little bit more tired towards the end of it, and I really felt like I was pushing and digging hard. Caveat to that, I've done a lot of running, did a marathon earlier in the week on Sunday, so maybe getting towards the end of the week, that made the legs feel heavy. But I was really surprised to get back and see that time, because I was expecting it to be much slower. It felt slow. I think overall the running that I was doing felt a little bit more laboured and a little bit more struggly than with really almost any of the other shoes that I ran in. So that they performed is a bit of a surprise. So that concludes the run testing part of this. Now we'll go back into the office and dig a little bit deeper into the data, see if we could draw out any really useful conclusions, and we'll talk a little bit more about how each of the shoes ran, which I preferred, which I would recommend, and all of that stuff. So we'll head back to the office. So we're back in the office. All of the mile tests have been done, and now I can stop running those all out miles. So let's have a quick look at those times in order then. Well, the Nike Alphafly Next Percent 2 was the fastest at 5:13 for the mile. The Adidas Prime X Strung came in second with 5:23, followed in third by the Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2 at 5:26, not too far behind it. And then a bit of a jump to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 at 5:37, and a bit of a surprise for me that one comes in top of the middle, I guess, or middle of the bottom. No, top of the middle of the bottom. Anyway, yeah, top of the bottom, I guess. And then you've got the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro, which came in at 5 minutes 40, and then bringing up the bottom there, you've got the ASICS Metaspeed Sky at 5 minutes 47. And what I'm going to do now is flash up on screen a card that compares all the stats that I gathered from each of those runs. If you want to dive deeper into that, I'm going to hold it on the screen for a second, but pause and have a look at those numbers side by side. I'm going to talk them through in a second, but if you want to dive in and be a bit geeky on it, now's the time to hit pause. So on there, we've got the mile time for each shoe. We've got the heart rate, average and max, so the effort during the all-out mile that I ran. Also my best pace during that mile, the average cadence and the average stride length. So when I've dived into that data kind of side by side, I think there's a few observations that are sort of quite interesting to pull out. The first one is that there's a pretty big jump in stride length for 4 of the shoes. That's the Pro 3, the Strung, the Alphafly and the Vaporfly versus the Speed 3 and the Metaspeed Sky. Essentially my stride length was much longer in the former 4 shoes than those other 2. During those miles I hit the highest best paces in the Alphafly Next Percent 2 and the Adidas Prime X Strung. Now that really sort of correlates a little bit with how I felt out there. You know, maybe it was sort of harder to rein the pace in. They were excitable and you did sort of feel like you wanted to push. So at times maybe I pushed faster in those shoes because they sort of felt like they were naturally sort of encouraging me to do so. The other thing, cadence was noticeably slower in the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus and the Adios Pro 3. Those were the 2 sort of slower miles. So again, you know, these are not, you know, necessarily, it might be sort of cause and effect. Maybe just because I ran a slower mile, maybe it was the way I was running that day, maybe it was what the shoes were doing and the shoes were making me feel, but I didn't feel like I was changing how I ran. I just went and did it all on feel and pushed, and this is sort of what happened kind of naturally. But that said, my heart rate averages and max were also lower in the Adios Pro 3 and the Metaspeed Sky Plus. So there's 2 things maybe here. One is that they were a more effortless shoe, although they ran slower, so that's probably not the case. Maybe I wasn't running quite as hard in those shoes, and hence that would affect the overall time for the mile. I personally, based on kind of my perceived exertion, I didn't feel that was the case at the time. I felt like I worked equally hard sort of in all of these shoes, or to my capacity at the time in all of these shoes. So, but there's some interesting things, you know, just to consider that, you know, there are some differences essentially in the way that these shoes have run. So on to the verdict then, and I think there's a big caveat here. This isn't a sort of truly scientific test. It was just an interesting test to see, I think, from my own kind of n=1 kind of experiments, which shoes I liked best, which shoes sort of came out maybe a little bit faster, which had the best ride. And I had some ideas going into this as to which shoes I thought would perform the best and which would feel a certain way. I was hoping though maybe that I might be able to get some surprise sort of results out of this. Maybe some shoes would shock me and perform differently. But without further ado, I'm going to sort of run through a list of kind of things that I found them sort of best for. So the fastest time was obviously the Alphafly Next Percent 2. I don't think that's necessarily a big surprise. You know, there've been lots of kind of lab tests done to sort of say that shoe, you know, supports the most kind of efficiency and the best kind of performance running. So that performed as I'd expected. I thought that one would come up top. I thought maybe the Adidas Prime X Strung might run it a close competition, but yeah, so the Alphafly Next Percent was top. When it came to my favourite ride, the one that I enjoyed running those miles most in, I think, you know, these were the 2 sort of punchiest shoes overall. It was the Alphafly Next Percent 2 and the Adidas Adizero Prime X Strung. They were just the most sort of joyful. There was the most energy return. They were kind of the most exciting, most lively, most punchy. So they're sort of, for the overall ride, those are the 2 that I would have picked out of this test as enjoyable shoes to run in. Now, there was one shoe that kind of stood out as the hardest, I think, to run, and the one that, you know, if you're talking about rate of perceived exertion, how much I had to dig to do the mile. There was one shoe really, and that was the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. Perhaps not a massive surprise because it's the only one in the test that doesn't have a carbon plate. It just felt like I was having to work a bit harder in that shoe to do the distance. My heart rate doesn't kind of bear that out to be true, but overall it felt like I was having to do a bit more in that shoe than the others. So that one was the one that I felt like over the mile was the one that required the most effort and energy from me. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about comfort. And I think this one is much more difficult to choose a single shoe that stood out really well. If I had to sort of isolate some of the shoes out of this, I would say the Primex Strung, they feel lovely on the foot in terms of comfort when you put your foot in. I just really like the way that they feel on the foot. The others, I guess, are shoes that, I guess when you first put them on with the uppers and the way that they hold the foot, they just feel a little bit more natural, maybe a little bit sort of more like a traditional shoe. They just had a little bit kind of more step in comfort. And I think those shoes are the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 and the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus. You know, I just feel like they're nice shoes when you first slip into them. The others, maybe you have to, there's a little bit of adjustment, there's a little bit of upper kind of manipulation in order to get them to feel good on the foot. So when it comes to that all-out miling, then the Alphafly and the Primex Strung, I think they were the fastest, they were the most fun to run in, and they were probably the ones that I would sort of lace up to go sort of smash out, you know, a really quick mile. Particularly, I think they come even more into their own if you were doing like a flat, straight road mile to try and get your best rather than something that's on twisty turny bends. But those really were the two shoes that really stood out for performance and overall kind of energy and fun. But that said, I've really still got a soft spot for the Vaporfly too. Every time I put these on after I've worn sort of other newer shoes and I go back, and I just think they're actually a really lovely shoe to race in. I do really enjoy, you know, the extra sort of ground contact, a bit more kind of close, sort of stripped back kind of racy feel that you get with them. They're still a big favourite of mine, and they weren't too shabby in terms of the pace as well. So, you know, I think Vaporfly is still very much a shoe that you go all out and run fast in. I'm not surprised to see lots and lots of people still picking them to go and run marathons. I also think they can do a job on the mile as well. So, you know, particularly now, maybe you can pick those up cheaper. Very, very much a shoe that should be considered in this bracket if you're looking for something to go all out. And they perhaps have a little bit more cornering ability and stability. So if you're running on particularly kind of tight, twisty, turny courses, they're probably one to consider for that as well. Speed 3 did well, really, in terms of speed by comparison, but felt like I was working a bit hard, and I think I would put them to one side for this kind of thing. And the ASICS Metaspeed Sky Plus, as much as I do actually like running in these shoes, I feel like they kind of fall slightly behind the competition in this bracket. And yeah, I don't know, the Metaspeed Sky Plus to me, maybe they have a place, they can do a job, but they're just not quite up there with the others. So yeah, that's that. And then finally, you've got those Adidas Adios Pro 3, which they're a fast shoe, absolutely are a fast shoe. They are a lively, punchy shoe as well. The one thing that I always find, I think just sort of lets them down a little bit is I have to work very hard to make those uppers feel nice on the foot. And as a result, I don't always enjoy running in them. And I think, you know, particularly, you know, obviously for a mile, it's not very long to have to put up with, but I think the Primex Strung with that high stack and the overall comfort of the uppers sort of really put that shoe ahead of the Adios Pro 3. I think if the Strung uppers come to the Pro 3 midsole, we might be talking about a really, really cracking shoe. So maybe Adi will treat us to that with the next generation. So there you have it. That has been my little experiment to try and find the fastest all-out mile shoe for me in the way that I run. I hope it's been interesting to watch. It was a fun experiment to do. Attack the science, I'm sure you will, in the comments below. I'm sort of open. It was, you know, it's not a truly scientific test. Let me know what shoes you really like to go out. And if you've got a favourite mile shoe, hit us up in the comments below. Let me know what you choose first. Always up for hearing what your kind of preferences are. If there are any other shoes that I've sort of obviously missed off this list that you think are great, hit them up. Let everyone else know the contenders, things that you've really found have worked over that kind of punchy distance. It all helps people to make smart decisions. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell for more content coming up on the channel soon. And we'll hope to see you again very soon on the Run Testers. Thanks for watching.